Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. What a treat. We are talking to folks who have radio in their history as we get ready to celebrate the 100th anniversary of radio history. And joining us this morning is actually like a local community legend, Kaylee Chris. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Susie.
This is just too much fun. You know, there are certain interviews you look forward to because you won't have to do any work. This would be one of those. You know what? We go back to, I think I'm remembering, you've kind of first got into this in about the early 90s, correct? Doing promotions. Tell me, how did you land in radio in the first place?
Well, I had originally been an art major in college, and it took me about 2 years to realize I don't have talent, and I needed to figure out different paths because that was not going to work. And I decided to try the major at the time at Bowling Green was radio, TV, film. So I thought, cinematography, and I'm like, that's not going to work. And I tried TV, and that wasn't going to work. And I took my first radio class, my second semester, my junior year, and fell in love, and everything just made sense. It was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. So I started off working in Geneva for about 3 years, came down here in 92. And I think you and I met that first year because, if you said I was doing promotions, I was filling in on the air, but I wasn't full-time on the air.
Yes.
But I was full-time promotions. And we were doing something with Malone, I believe with like the pumpkin hunt or something along those lines.
I think that was right.
It may have snowed that year on that event too.
You remember that? And we had children putting their heads in buckets of water, bobbing
yes,
for
I remember
apples.
that. Oh my God.
While there's
And
snow
it was so
on the ground.
It was so cold. You actually gave me a Malone sweatshirt, which I have to this day, and I wear in the middle of winter because it's like the warmest sweatshirt I have.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And I hope none of those children became sick because that was just nuts to do that. So much fun, though. You know what I remember of your early days? You used to do like an interview with someone, and then you would edit it and you would put music to it. And instead of having your own voice asking questions, you would say, I asked Susie about this, and then just play the answer. And it was like an early podcast. It was so well produced, and that was so you. Do you remember those? Those were outstanding.
Oh, yeah. It was called Upfront. It was a 2-minute interview, and it gave me an opportunity to really kind of showcase going on in Stark County. And that's how it was a wonderful opportunity for me because I got to know all these people and talk to people about these events. And it kind of got me educated on what was going on in the area as well. I loved doing that show. Loved it.
It was so good. It sounded way better than like just local radio. It sounded
You're so sweet.
So metropolitan. I've just got to say, that was so good. And I think I called you about every day, didn't I, to say, how can we do this on Upfront? And
well, what was funny was that people used to ask me, how is it that Malone gets on so often? And I said, you know what the secret is? She calls me because I don't know what's happening, and she does. She knows what's happening in her organization. So if you call me and tell me what's going on, I will try to get you on.
It was awesome. So thank you again for that. It really was fun.
Welcome.
We did have some good times.
We did.
So then you started doing middays, which was perfect because I don't think you're an early riser either, are you?
No.
As am I, not. So
I used to fill in on mornings when when the morning show would be off. And it was so fun I did it. Terry Simmons was the program director, and he did mornings. And they called him. People called him the next day, and they said, she did okay, but wow, she is not a morning person. And the guys on the AM, it was so funny. I had never said a word, and I would come in about 5 a.m. to try to get ready, and nobody would speak to me. They all knew not to speak to me until that microphone had been opened at least once. And then they'd stick their head in and they're like, good morning, how you doing?
Oh,
okay,
man.
Whatever.
You don't have to be awake. You just have to sound awake. That
Exactly.
was the trick. You could have your eyes closed and put your head on the table if you need to, but you have to sound awake.
The wonderful thing about radio, you do not have to look good.
Which I've just got to say, well, you always look good anyway, but I've just got to say that station has taken the best part of radio and ruined it by putting them on TV, So I just have to say, why would you want anybody seeing what you look like at 5:30 in the morning? I just don't.
I didn't want anybody to see what I looked like at 10 o'clock in the morning. We had our engineer come in and say, what do you think about having a camera there? And I went, no.
No, sirree.
I mean, other people are much more comfortable, and that's fine with them. But for me, I was like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. But you found the perfect, ideal time, 10 to 2. Tell me about doing middays. That was kind of like a fun little midday party, wasn't it?
Yeah, I did middays when I was in Geneva for the first 2 years I was there. And then when they put me on here, it was originally 10 to 2 and then 10 to 3. And to me, I love it because, like you said, I don't have to get up early. I did some work beforehand. I did some work afterwards. So it was kind of like a 9 to 5 job. And I got to talk to people at work. And they would call me, and I always kept thinking, if I could brighten up their workday a little bit and make it a little more entertaining, that's a plus, you know?
People don't think of 10 to 2 as being high radio time, but it really, really is, isn't it? Because you are encouraging folks while they're at the workplace.
I think so. I one of my goals was always to bring respect back to middays because I felt like a lot of radio stations kind of throw that time period away. And to me, is if you are a listen to radio station, that's a big chunk of the day that you could be talking to your listeners. And my favorite part was when people would call me, and if I could get some subject going and people would call in, that was the absolute best. And especially if people started kind of arguing with each other on the air. I'm just kind of the traffic cop, and I'm like presenting everybody's opinion, and it was a blast.
Yeah. For folks who have not worked behind a microphone enclosed in a tiny little space that's like padded walls, basically, talk to me about that experience. How do you continue to keep it going? Kind of like talking to yourself, but you're not. Tell me about how was that for you?
I kind of describe my job is that, I do is sit in the room and I talk to myself. You have to make it sound like a big party. And, I always figured I knew there were people listening. So I was just talking like I have a conversation. But yeah, it would be kind of weird when you're looking at it from the outside that you're sitting in a room and nobody's there, but you're having a whole conversation. Now, I had friends of mine. It was so funny. I would call them. I'm like, oh, my gosh, we have not talked in ages. It'd be like in the evening or something. They said, no, we talk every day. I'm like, no, we don't. And they said, yeah. And I'm like, no, I haven't talked to you in ages. They said, no, you talk to me every day. And I said, she goes, I listen to you. They'd say, I listen to you or whatever. I'm like, but you're not talking back to me. It's a one-way conversation.
Right. But people feel very connected to you because you have that way. I mean, you're just such a welcoming, approachable kind of a person that, to listen to you on the air, you just feel like you are having a conversation with you. We probably are answering you, and you just don't hear. That's the
I'm not getting to your
part.
End of the conversation.
That's it. You're only hearing your part of it. But there are worse ways to spend an afternoon and late morning than listening to some great music, right? I mean, that had to be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. Especially when I had my request show from noon to 1. Dan Kane asked me, did you ever dance in the studio? I said, oh yeah, all the time. And I'd be singing away and people would catch me and I don't care because it was fun and I had a blast. So that's what's so fun about it. And, I was radio a lot over the years, and now we're, much more involved in the community and out in public. And to me, I love that. That to me is fun.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think of a time where you actually even chaired the Light Up Downtown Committee. You didn't just cover something in the community. You would dive right in and become involved with it. Talk to me about how important that part was.
Well, it was funny because I actually chaired it multiple times. I chaired it in the early 90s, and then Char Wassenheiser from the Car Museum and I co-chaired that event for 7 years in a row. They just couldn't seem to get rid of it.
I didn't realize it was that many. Wow.
But that was one of the things when I first got here, being in promotions, and my official title was Promotions and Public Affairs Director, and they wanted somebody to be involved in the community. So that was kind of part of my job. And I loved it. I just loved it. And when I went on the air, it wasn't something I was going to get rid of because, again, I enjoyed it. And then I got a chance to MC, which is really what I love to do. And, some people, I always tell people, you give me a microphone and an audience and good luck in a stage and good luck getting it back. Because it probably isn't coming back. But that was so much fun for me, and to be able to get out in the community and meet the listeners and get to talk to them and get to know them, that helped me know what to talk about in the air too, because I knew what they were interested in.
emceeing. Since you brought it up, let's go there next. You did everything, the Queen's pageant. I mean, I know nothing's happened this year, but how many years of Queen's pageants and all the main things happening around here? Again, light up. I mean, think of cool things going on. Hall of Fame week kept you very busy.
Very busy.
Just talk to me about those experiences.
Well, the Queen pageant, the first time I did it was 94. I did it 94, 95. And I think we were trying to figure this out like last year. I think I came back in 01 or right around that time, and I've done it ever since.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, the events in this area, I've really have been so fortunate to be able to be on stage and host a lot of them. You know, the drum corps competition, I love drum corps. I think that's
so good.
Pretty obvious. And when I came down here, and then one of the first things, you know, Hall of Fame was happening, and in one of our meetings said, okay, so who's going to cover the drum corps? I'm like, me, let me do it. And they're like, okay. And then pretty much it was, you know, mine. And then in 99 is when I took over the emceeing part of it. And really got to have fun with that. But all the events, the Business Excellence Awards,
yes.
You know, that was so much fun. The American Heart Association Heart Ball, which we just had a wonderful one this year, even though it was virtual. The Cancer Society walks, the Making Strides walks, the Making Strides breakfast. And there's a lot of smaller events that I was lucky enough to be able to be asked to host. And I always love to be able to tell them, listen, whatever you know, don't worry about the program. I've got that. You worry about anything else, but I've got the program, and it'll go smoothly. If there's a problem, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. But I've got this. You deal with everything else. It's one less thing they have to worry about.
Well, and that was one nice thing about bringing you on to do that emceeing, because you knew you didn't have to worry about that part. Here's a pro. She's going to make it go very smoothly, take you from here to there, and we don't have to worry about that. That's a nice thing to be able to check off your list. Your wardrobe of gowns must just be so cool.
Now, going back to the Queen pageant, I was extremely fortunate in that the Bridal Salon offered to let me borrow a dress every year.
Nice.
So I would go down there, and oh my gosh, it was like a big game of dress up. I had so much fun. And then we'd pick a dress out or whatever to you know, highlight in the whole bit. I've got a nice little closet full of dresses. I got to say, I have friends who are, you know, they're like, if we wear the same size, can I borrow one of your dresses? I'm like, sure.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I'm gonna just say, you always looked spectacular. You know, I mean, up there, it would be intimidating, I would think, to be standing there behind the microphone with all of the contestants for the Hall of Fame Queen behind you. But you always held your own, Kaylee. You always held your own.
That was intimidating. They're 18 to 22 years old, and they can pull off most looks that I cannot. But that was, you had to find the right dress.
Oh, well, you did. Let me just say, hats off. You did. Absolutely. We're speaking with Kaylee Chris. We're really, honestly, we're talking about radio history, but, you know, sometimes a little fashion as well. But, so fun to find out.
Which is unusual, is how most of what you think about radio is we're heard and not seen.
Right.
And that's not true anymore.
No, not anymore. And actually not since the internet, I think. All of that anonymity went away. But you, being a promotions person, really got your station represented so well out in the community. We're going to talk about the great event that never happened, but that's going to happen after these words. You're listening to Our Community. Welcome back to Our Community. Susie Thomas speaking with Kaylee Chris, talking about radio history, because radio's been such a part of her history. Would that be herstory? Anyway, I want to talk to you about the best event that never happened, and it was Dancing with the DJs. Going back when I was doing mornings here, and I had this great idea to raise some money for one of the local organizations, and contacted you, and we did start taking ballroom dancing, a bunch of us, and then that got shelved. Someone put the kibosh on it, but You continued, Kaylee. Talk to me about your ballroom dancing.
That was so much fun, and Jerry from Prestige Ballrooms, he apparently had called you and said, "Okay, who was the most upset that it wasn't going to happen?"
That
and
was
you. Said it was me. And he called me and he said, "You know what? I think I can make this work." And that started, a chance for me to take ballroom dance lessons. I competed multiple times, and then I did some routines. The most recent one, which was several years ago, I did a paso doble to Jethro Tull's Locomotive Breath. And it was so fun. Now, what kind of an interesting situation that happened was that I was competing with Jerry at a competition, doing a Viennese waltz to David Cook's Time of My Life. Oh. I had edited the music down to about 2.5 minutes. You have to be on and off the dance floor within 3 minutes. So I edited it. The whole thing was choreographed. We worked very hard on it. We go on the dance floor, and our team was at one of the tables, and they said that at one point they knew something was wrong because something flashed across my face, but then it was gone. And I said, "Yeah, the second verse kicked in," and I knew I cut out the second verse. Oh. So at that point, I knew he gave them the wrong cut of music, and we had 2.5 minutes of choreography and a 4-minute song. And
so you just repeat? What do you do?
Oh no, we made it up.
Oh my!
I just basically held on for dear life and followed him because he's leading, and he didn't realize what had happened. He just was realizing nothing was hitting where it should be in the music. So we're just going, and I'll tell you what, my adrenaline was going about 200 miles an hour. Oh. At the very end, it was just like a very slow layback or whatever. He's like, go slow, go slow, go slow. And I was so exhausted. I had to switch my feet. It was hysterical. And we're coming off the floor. And I said, "What happened?" He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "That was the wrong music. We made up 1.5 minutes of that." He's like, "Oh my gosh, you're kidding me." I'm like, "No."
Well, that says you really did learn ballroom dancing. If you really could follow somebody leading and you weren't just doing something that you've memorized together forever.
Yeah. Well, he's a very strong lead, which helps. But yeah, I do know how to follow pretty well, and it was funny. We got killed in our scores because we were way over time, but it was a heck of an experience and something I will never forget. And we did end up going back and doing that with the correct cut of music.
Oh, good.
Like a year later.
Oh, good. He didn't notice that he'd been dancing for 4 minutes instead of 2.5?
You get caught up. You're trying. I mean, I know his mind was going a million miles an hour because he's trying to figure out why we're not hitting the spots we should.
Yeah.
And then he's trying to make up what we're going to, just kind of going with it.
Oh my.
And it was a wild 4 minutes, I will say.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, my problem when we were taking those lessons for Dancing with the DJs, my problem was I had been a phys ed major in college and I had learned how to lead. So learning how to follow was really, really tricky for me. And my husband was just so happy that whole thing got canceled. Because I was leading him all the way around.
Being a very type A personality. I can't tell you how many times he would look at me and go,
yeah. Yeah. I can just see what he was saying. You have all kinds of fun hobbies. Let's talk about bell choir as well.
That was something. I played piano. I took lessons for 14 years as a kid. I played French horn in high school. And when we moved, we lived in Pennsylvania. We moved back to Ohio, to Lake County when I was 12. And Mom and Dad were trying to find something that would, get me involved because, and my church had a bell choir. My sister and brother had played before we left for Pennsylvania, so they put me in it. And I, again, fell in love. And I've been playing ever since I was 12 years old. And this has been the longest time I've ever taken off with the COVID. But, yeah, I absolutely, it's therapy for me. I love it. Love it.
Well, it's, again, a teamwork kind of thing. You have to be so aware of what others around you are doing. Kind of like ballroom dancing. You have to be really aware of the other people to be able to get in there. Just the timing and everything.
Yeah, I heard it described, and I completely agree. It is the ultimate team sport because if you've ever played an instrument and you will play a run, a run up the scale or whatever, think about the fact that you have two bells in your hand and you can two of those notes and you've got notes in right where they're supposed to be, whether it's quarter notes, 16th notes, 30-second notes. You got to figure out, or if it's some crazy rhythm, and you've got to figure out where to put yours in, and it has to mesh right in so it all fits together. It's pretty and so if you are not at rehearsal, it's not like a singing choir. We only have one less alto this time. No, those notes are not being played, and it throws everybody else off. So,
my gosh, it's right. Crazy. You'd have to, in your head, be thinking that note so that, oh my goodness, that would be tough. There's something else that you do that I just love, and it's kind of fashion-oriented, but it also is very philanthropic, and it's Premier Jewelry. Kaylee, talk to me a little bit about Premier Jewelry and that company that you represent so well.
Well, Premier just changed now. They're called Devoted, and what's really cool about that, Premier, if you're familiar with Premier Jewelry, we still have the Premier Jewelry, but now Devoted is like kind of a website, like a small Amazon, and representing companies across the world where every time somebody makes a purchase, that company pledges to make a donation to a cause that is near and dear to their hearts. There are several that are supporting anti-human trafficking, which is a big problem, and I don't think people realize that. There's another company that's promoting adoption, which is near and dear to my heart. I've got a niece and nephew who are adopted. There's another one where it's supporting, clean water, all sorts of things. And it is so cool that they're doing this. So when you make a purchase of, we have coffee, we've got clothing, we have baby items, we've got candles and coffee mugs and drinkware. It's very, very cool.
Wow. It's almost Amazon with a heart.
Yes, exactly.
You just shop there as well. Where do we find it, and how do we find out more? Because we really are, these are supporting a lot of the causes that I think many of us care about.
Yeah, well, you can, my website, you can go to dvtd.com/Kaylee Chris. dvtd.com/Kaylee Chris. Yeah. All right. We're going to definitely do that. Okay, back to radio. Thinking back on your career so far, just to this point, talk to me about some of the highlights. One of the things one of the awful days on the air, and I'm sure you will remember, if you were on the air that day, it's something ingrained in your head, 9/11.
Absolutely.
I was on the air during that whole situation.
Yeah.
And it was an absolutely horrendous day. But what came out of that, I remember we were sitting talking, what can we do? And we came up with the idea was, why don't we ask people in the community to donate $1? $1 is all we were asking. We knew other people would donate more than that, but there were some people that could only donate $1. And we thought even if everybody only donated $1, that adds up. So we started doing that out in front of the radio station, and the response was incredible. I mean, we had little kids coming up with their piggy banks, opening it up, and pouring out change, pennies and nickels and dimes on our tables. And I think we raised over $100,000.
Oh my goodness!
Within a week, which was amazing. I mean, and another one was, of course, the All Your Wishes Can Happen, Wishathon. That I've always said, and if you saw the article, it's always the toughest 2 days of the year, the most rewarding. And there was a day there. I was interviewing a mom and a 9-year-old girl, and the mom had said, this was several years ago, and she said, we're going to find out today if she's cancer-free. I'm like, we are so pulling for you, pulling for you. So anyway, she left the tent, the two of them left the tent, and I'm standing there with the others on the air, and suddenly we heard this cheer, and I was the only one that had a wireless microphone. I looked at my boss, and he just pointed, and I went running out there, and I said, what's going on? What's going on? She goes, we just got the call. She's cancer-free. To be a part of that moment.
Oh, my goodness.
A 9-year-old cancer-free, and we were there to be a part of that. And then I came back and could not continue. I got way too emotional.
Well, first of all, you've had no sleep for 2 days. And then to be part of that emotional of a time, I just can't even imagine. No, everybody's got to cut you some slack at that point and let you just sob. You just have to. You got to do some really fun things, didn't you? Did you get to be part of Media Day? Have you ever gone up in a balloon and open up Cedar Point and all those things?
Funny story about Cedar Point. and you know the person I went with because she was my intern at the time. We went up to Cedar Point and to do like a little. I would do some some of the rock. At that point, there were big clunky telephones, cell phones. This was probably 90. I think it was 93.
So a Jerry Seinfeld kind of cell phone.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. I got up there and the marketing department said, we have to tape the phone to your hand because we're afraid you're going to drop it on the rides. I'm like, okay. So I'm walking around all day with this phone taped to my left hand, which was hilarious. And then I would call the radio station. The guy back on the air would record the phone call. And then I would say, hey, if you want to win some Cedar Point tickets, call now. And that was the cue to call.
Yeah.
So we'd done a couple of these and then I got on the mean streak and we were in the front car and my intern's with me. And we're going up the hill, and I'm like, oh, it's Kaylee Cruz, we're up here, and we're on the mean streak. And then I said, what, time for the break. Okay, so I start going through this thing again. I said, I'm on the mean streak, and we had just crested the hill. And I said, we're just going up the hill, and wow, is that a big hill? And we started going, and my intern starts screaming at the top of her lungs. I'm laughing hysterically. Screaming and screaming and screaming. And finally, about the fifth hill, I finally like, Rick, I gotta call you back. I can't talk. So I got off. I called him back, and he was still in hysterics. He goes, that was the funniest thing I ever heard in my life. They recorded the entire screaming, and they played that in the background when we had a winner. And for years, people said, I remember you screaming up at Cedar Point. I'm like, it wasn't me.
No.
It wasn't me.
But everybody associates it with you. It's one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life. And was that live on the air? But they recorded it,
No.
So it was recorded. But we were the benefit of getting to hear the whole thing,
yes.
right?
He was recording it live, but then he played it back later.
Yes.
Yeah, that was one of the funniest things. The balloon classics. I mean, the media launch. I mean, had some fabulous landings. Had a couple of little rough landings. Had one. The last one was a little on the rougher side, and when the pilot's going, bend your knees, we're coming in hard. I'm like, oh my God, we're going to die.
Oh, man.
We were okay. We were absolutely fine. But I'm like, maybe somebody else should have the opportunity to go back to this.
Yes, it can have a turn. But isn't it the most amazing thing? You're just floating. Try and describe it.
It's funny because people would call me and they say, well, can you have them fly over my house? I'm like, they don't have any control. It's all where the wind is, but you don't feel the wind because you're going with the wind. And the poor dogs, first thing in the morning, they can hear the propane, going into the balloons, and they're barking because they're warning, their owners that there's something up there, and the owners are yelling them to shut up because they don't know that we're pets, so bad for the dogs. But hey, you look down and you can just see. Funny thing, I remember I was calling into the station, and the guy in the air said, well, how's traffic? I'm like, it looks great. He goes, where are you? I said, I have no idea.
Right. But the traffic's fine.
Traffic's great. It's wide open.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Can't tell you what street. Kaylee, this has been so much fun. I knew it would fly by as we revisit radio history and folks who have been so much a part of our history of listening to the radio. Kaylee Chris, thank you on behalf of all of us, all you have given to our community.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.